What's up, everybody? This is Danny Thompson from AroundTheAssociation.com, as well as the Around the Association podcast. And so we're starting part one of a 30-part series, and I did say a 30-part series, giving you your favorite team a brief synopsis of what is to come in the offseason. Last night, we're going to start the series off tonight with the Houston Rockets. The Rockets last night, actually on May 28th, ended their season by losing in Game 7 to the Golden State Warriors by a score of 101-92. But it doesn't take away the fact of what the Rockets did the entire season this year. The Rockets led the NBA in wins in the regular season with 65 wins. One of the best Rockets teams they've had since the championship team. The team that's been the furthest since they won the championship, not even 20-something years ago. The Rockets were just phenomenal all season, led by was soon to be the MVP of the league in James Harden. They had Chris Paul. Trevor Ariza had a great season. The emergence of Clint Capella. Eric Gordon is up for Sixth Man of the Year again. Capella's up for Most Improved Player. Like I said, James Harden will more likely win the MVP award, and he was also first team unanimous All-NBA. Unfortunately, last night the Rockets season came to a crashing halt last night as they pretty much unfortunately missed every single three-pointer they took last night. It seemed like they shot 7 of 43, missing 27 in a row as they were eliminated last night. And unfortunately, at the same time, as many three-pointers they missed their all-star Chris Paul, who was out with a hamstring injury and missed the final 2 games of the series. And now there'll be the biggest question of what if? What if Chris Paul was healthy for Game 6 or Game 7? Would it have been a different series? The way that Chris Paul was playing in the Games 4 and 5, one would think that the Rockets were going to be in a shape where they can get themselves back to the NBA Finals. The good news is the Rockets that they have a brand new owner, Tillman Furtado. They have one of the best home courts in the NBA, and Mike D'Antoni more likely will win Coach of the Year this year because guess what? The Rockets were phenomenal all season long. Like I said, they finished year 65-17. They were the most dominant. They did everything that you want them to do all season offensively, putting up numbers that were just astronomical all season, leading the NBA in so many different categories in the offensive side of the ball, three-point shooting, makes, attempts. Their 7 seconds less offense was so phenomenal all season long. Teams had a hard time stopping it. But the hard part with the Rockets this season was, of course, they live and die by the three-pointer, and last night, they died by it. A team that shoots so many three-pointers, how can they keep this pace up the whole season? And it was just fatigue. The Rockets were just fatigued last night. So as you look into the offseason, now we're talking about the offseason. Like I said, you wonder what are they going to do this year? So if you look at the roster, how it's set and how the team played this year, like I said, they were the number 2 scoring offense in the NBA. And surprisingly, they were the 6th best when it came to points allowed in the NBA. Of course, they were number 1 in offensive rating. I think number 1 in offense efficiency. They were pretty much better than what they expected to be all season long. So if you look at where the Rockets are going into the offseason, this is where it becomes hairy. The Rockets are one of the older teams in the NBA when it comes to what's on their roster. Now, it's looking at what they have to deal with this summer, the question is about Chris Paul. Now, Tillman Furtado in the front office is that Chris Paul is going to get every bit of that maximum extension because guess what? He did waive his trade clause to come to Houston and really just give himself a lot of money because he could have signed a $200 million deal with the Clippers and decided to be traded to Houston. We're more likely they're going to, to give him the long-term extension. Now, the other concern is Clint Capella. Clint Capella is a restricted free agent and is going to attract offers from pretty much anywhere. And if the Rockets are smart, they're going to re-sign Capella because Capella was phenomenal all season, number 2 in the NBA when it came to alley-oop dunks with another guard, which was James Harden. Second in the league behind Russell Westbrook and Steven Adams. Capella will get a lot of offers in the open market because Clint Capella is a really, really good basketball player. But the Rockets should re-sign Capella. It shouldn't be much of a no-brainer. Capella this year averaged 13 points, almost 14 points, almost 11 rebounds a game, almost 2 blocks a game. I mean, is a serious contender for Most Improved Player because Capella hadn't started performing like this until after Dwight Howard was traded. Now, as far as the rest of the roster goes, that becomes a real interesting dilemma. Now, if you look at what's on the salary cap and what the Rockets have going into next season, you would think that they have a lot of cap space because Chris Paul comes off the books. You have guys like Trevor Ariza, who's a free agent. Like I said, Capella's a restricted free agent, and the Rockets don't have, Eric Gordon is at $13.5 million, James Harden, of course, at $30. The only other guaranteed contracts are PJ Tucker at $7.9 and Nene Hilaria, who's at $3.7 million. Everything else is off the books. The problem is Ryan Anderson will be making $20.4 million next year and $21.2 million the following season after that. Anderson got the contract at the end of the 2016 season, where he was one of the Rockets' best offensive players. Problem is, he's fallen out of favor because his jump shot's also fallen by the wayside as well too. Unless Ryan Anderson can somehow the Rockets can convince some team to take on Ryan Anderson's contract, this is going to be a long off season once again, trying to move the sharpshooting big man who just doesn't have a role in Houston because he's not very good defensively and he doesn't move quick enough with the pace of the 7 seconds less. Now, if they're slowing it down and they kick it out to Anderson, it's great. Now, Ryan Anderson really hasn't had a superly huge season. His best years were in Orlando, had some really good years in New Orleans. And, he had a couple good seasons in Houston, but it's just that he fell so much out of favor this year with the Rockets and the way the Rockets were playing. I mean, he rarely played in the series against Golden State because it was such a bad matchup. And when he did play last night, you saw what happened. The Warriors pretty much put him in a blender situation where they were going back and forth with him and just allowing Steph Curry to just nail Ryan Anderson to the wall every time he gets stuck in a pick and roll situation. Now, the coaching situation is fine. Mike D'Antoni's not going to go anywhere, and James Harden will be back. And back to his MVP states. And so when you look at what potentially this team can do. Now, with Chris Paul being traded before last season, the Rockets retained the bird rights, but they can't get the 5th-year extension, but they retain the bird rights on Paul. Paul's cap hold is at $35 million. He is going to command that and deserves every bit of it, as we learned in the conference finals. Chris Paul is a guy you have to sign going forward. That's just what you have to do. Paul is the best player on this team, and he's the most important player. Harden's the best league's MVP, but Paul, as we've learned last night, is the most important player. If they had Chris Paul, a lot of these issues wouldn't have happened last night, especially Stephen Curry scoring a lot of points. Now, other cap holds in the roster, of course, Clint Capella does have a $7 million hold, which will be released. Now, how does cap holds work? If a player is released off the cap hold, that means the team has the available salary cap. Now, the most the Rockets can have in salary cap space, even if they decide to elect to take away Chris Paul, be $13 million, up to $18 million if they decide to renounce Chris Paul. So, if you're talking LeBron James, that means Chris Paul goes out the door. There's no chance to sign both those guys. Unless both of them take significant pay cuts, it's not going to happen. And then they still have to figure out what to do with Clint Capella. Because Capella is a restricted free agent this summer. And there are going to be teams throwing offer sheets at him and probably going to be offering him super amounts of money. The Rockets have to figure out if LeBron James is worth it. Are you going to get rid of the only guy that protects the paint and grabs rebounds and an offense that shoots an abnormal number of threes? Now, the luxury tax is looking like the salary cap is looking to be $101 million. That's the estimate for 2019. And without the cap hold, it's about $87 million. So, like I said, you're looking at about $14 million cap space without re-signing anybody. Now, mind you, they still have a whole ton of free agents on this roster. The holes in the roster include, like I said, Chris Paul is one, the restricted free agency of Clint Capella is another one. You also have Trevor Ariza, who's also a free agent. I know Rockets fans are not happy with Trevor Ariza after missing 9 3-pointers and going 0 for 12 last night. But Ariza is your best on-ball defender and still is one of the more accurate three-point shooters in the league. Also, other free agents include Luke Baramute, who was also hurt in the series. He had a shoulder injury and he wasn't 100% the entire series. Gerald Green, a guy they found off the waiver wire and turned into a humongous big-time scorer off the bench. Joe Johnson, Tariq Black, Aaron Jackson, and Markel Brown, all free agents on this roster. And the only one that's a restricted free agent is Markel Brown. I don't think they'll get any more offers on Brown, and they'll more likely bring him back. And the restricted number on him and the cap hold for Markel Brown is right around... I'm getting the number for you guys right quick. His number would be right around $1.3 million, and he's on the books guaranteed for that amount of money next year. So really, it's not much. But the Rockets, when it comes to the summer, what can they do? Well, really, if you look at Houston, they didn't get a full answer how to win the championship. Because remember, Chris Paul was injured. Malik Baramute was not completely healthy. Now, mind you, Baramute is one of your better defenders. They also could have guarded Kevin Durant as well, too, to take some of that defensive pressure off of Trevor Ariza having to chase Kevin Durant for 41 minutes like he did last night. If you're the Houston Rockets, what do you do this summer? Well, really, you just bring everybody back. You're at the point now where you're not going to be able to bring in a major free agent unless you lose Chris Paul. I think Chris Paul was the perfect running mate for James Harden, and so you have a great three-guard rotation that includes Chris Paul. You have Eric Gordon, who's one of the best six men in the entire league, and James Harden, who is your league's MVP. It gets no better than those three when it comes to a combination of three guards in the NBA, and they all play well together. Now, what we learned last night is the Rockets do need a backup point guard. They've got to find some kind of backup point guard because, I mean, Aaron Jackson, Markel Brown, these guys aren't really backup point guards. They got to find somebody in the offseason that can help out, and give Chris Paul some minutes, on the bench, or even worst case scenario, if Chris Paul does go down, you have somebody that can control the game that doesn't make Eric Gordon a playmaker. Now, Gordon was really good at getting to the basket, but in drawing fouls, and at the same time, you still don't have somebody coming off the bench that can spell, those moments, and also, take some of the ball hand responsibilities away from Gordon and James Harden, let them just be scorers like they are, as what they are, as pure, unadulterated scorers. Now, guys, I can see fitting the situation and fitting the mold. That could be a nice addition for them. You know what? Unrestricted free agent that be kind of interesting. A number is Yogi Ferrell of the Dallas Mavericks, a guy in their division, a guy that can get up and down. He can shoot the basketball pretty solid. He's a pretty solid shooter. He's also an unrestricted free agent. Now he did play down the road, in Houston, in Dallas last year. He averaged 10 points a game off the bench for Dallas this year, and really. He's a guy that shot 38%, almost 38% from the 3-point line. And, he had that stretch, a year, 2 seasons ago where he became, the star guy because, the hype guy because guess what? Everybody was injured. So Farrell is a nice little guy. I wonder if they can get him with the mid-level. Speaking of the mid-level exception, the Rockets do own their entire mid-level exception. So they have the ability to get that $8 million, the $8.6 million space they have for the mid-level exception. They have it. They don't have the biannual exception this year, but they do have, the mid-level, and that's something they can use because they used the biannual last year on the Ney. So what they can do is you can get somebody with that $8 million, a preferable, another. For me, if I'm the Rockets and I'm spending the $8 million for the exception, like I said, maybe Trevor Ariza will be the guy you put back at that spot. Ariza did make almost $12 million last year. I'm not sure if he's going to take anything less. Or Tillman Furtado is a guy that has a lot of money. Maybe he just go into luxury tax. And and go deep. But if you're using the $8 million exception, especially in the class that is 100% not truly the deepest class when it comes to free agents, especially in the point guard area, in the point guard realm, you can probably use that that list, that 8.5 million to take care of a nice point guard that you can find, especially later on. Because once the bigger names are gone, you're going to find some pretty solid point guards in the next tier. Other options, like I said, Yogi Ferrell is a guy I would look at, to be a nice potential backup for Chris Paul because he's a solid shooter. Really, other guys that you can look at as options: Shabazz Napier, Corey Joseph. Napier made $2.4 million last year, averaged 8 points a game. He knows how to be a backup point guard and is also a very good shooter at the same time. Corey Joseph, he might be re-signing Indiana, is another one of those guys that can carry the load offensively. Other guys, there's some pretty solid point guards in that next tier, but you want to find a point guard that's going to be able to get up and down. A potential option could be Jeremy Lin if he decides to opt out of the Brooklyn Nets. Lin has a player option. It'd be a different comeback story. Lin was coached by D'Antoni in New York. It'd be an interesting fit to try and bring him back again. But it could be another option. The Rockets do need a backup point guard. Now, another thing that the team could use this summer is probably one more versatile swing big type of player. I know they had, I say that, one of those swing guys that can play the 3 and the 4, but athletic enough to guard those positions. What they didn't have in the Warriors series was another guy to guard Kevin Durant. Like I said, Bayern Mute was hurt. Trevor Ariza is one guy, and PJ Tucker is an undersized power forward. I mean, he plays small forward, but he's also like 6'4", 6'5". So he's also a little bit undersized, even though he has a heart and like a bulldog. So that's another thing they can look at is what you can see in the summer for the Rockets is maybe them going after another forward that has some versatility and can defend, a wing type of shooter that you can see, a guy that could play that role. I know Ryan Anderson's a guy on this roster, but hey, what about a guy like Ersan Ilyasova? We saw what he did in Philadelphia this year. Ilyasova is a Ryan Anderson type player, but remember, he's much more accurate than Ryan Anderson was this season. Like I said, a guy who's another stretch 4, because with the Rockets, you can never have enough stretch 3s and 4s and 5s. You can never have enough of those guys. Just remember, I think guys like Nene and those guys were just a bad matchup. Joe Johnson, another guy who was 37, they probably won't bring back. But, unless it's a cheap number, he could be one of those guys that you can get, for the vet minimum. I think he can come back and be another solid mentor, another guy that could use rotation. So, to give a long story short, the Rockets, like I said, finished one game short of the NBA Finals. They have a lot of free agents coming up on this roster. I think the smart thing for Houston fans is to really just go ahead and re-sign everybody. Bring back Chris Paul, bring back Trevor Ariza, get Byron Mute healthy, and run this whole thing back. Re-sign Capella no matter what team puts the offer down. Go on the tax and try to beat the Warriors the right way. Mike D'Antoni said it last night, that this team was constructed to beat the Warriors, and he believes it. And I think every Rockets fan listening to this podcast and also NBA fans across the league realize the same thing. The Warriors were in trouble. And just unfortunately, some bad breaks happened. And when bad breaks happen, you saw what happened. The Warriors ended up back in the finals, and the Rockets fell one game short of the finals. So, in my opinion, what the Rockets should do this summer is re-sign everybody. And if they decide to go out and grab somebody else, a guy like a Yogi Ferrell, a Belisa out of Minnesota, if you decide to get him, Ersan Ilyasova, another guy that could be another stretch 3 or 4, or another defender would be nice. But really, they need a backup point guard. So I would spend the $8 million if it's not a Trevor Ariza. Go out and go get yourself a nice backup point guard, a Shabazz Napier, somebody like that who can knock down shots and can also take some of the pressure off Chris Paul, because Chris Paul is going to miss games. Like I said, Paul's been injured almost every single season since he's been in the league, and he only played, I think, 61 games this year due to injury, and the Rockets still were successful without him, but you want to be able to have some kind of depth going into the playoffs, because as we learned, if the playoff rotations get short, the Rockets didn't have another true point guard to rest James Harden or to rest Eric Gordon, especially with Chris Paul being out. So we're going to take this series out and do all 30 teams. Please leave your comments and feedback below, Rocket fans or fans across the league. Follow me on Twitter at NBADT29, also the Around the Association Facebook page, as well as AroundTheAssociation.com. So this is Danny Thompson from AroundTheAssociation.com. We'll see you guys later on for our next podcast, and we'll figure out who's coming up next. See you guys later. Peace.